Ethan had always been a simple man. He worked as a technician at the city's busiest spaceport, a place that was always filled with alien ships, distant travelers, and the hum of intergalactic communication. Yet, despite the vastness of the universe surrounding him, he had always felt out of place. Nothing ever seemed to excite him, and the people around him were either too busy or too distant for him to connect with. That all changed when Lyra stepped into his life. She was unlike anyone he had ever met, tall, graceful, with deep purple eyes that seemed to glimmer with hidden knowledge. She wasn't just an alien from Xyrexia. She was a diplomat. And when she arrived at the spaceport on that particular day, she did so with a purpose. The moment she walked through the terminal, people stopped. The room felt lighter, charged with something no one could quite explain. Ethan, however, was too busy with his tools to notice her arrival at first. His focus was always on the job at hand. As he adjusted the wiring of a transport shuttle, he felt a strange sensation. A sudden warmth on his skin, as if the air around him had thickened. When he looked up, he saw her. Lyra stood there, an expression of curiosity on her face as she surveyed the room. She was the kind of person who would never blend into the background. Even in a room full of aliens, humans, and travelers from across the galaxy, her presence was magnetic. Ethan felt something in his chest tighten, a strange pull he couldn't explain. It was as if his body recognized something that his mind couldn't. He quickly shook it off as nothing more than the fatigue of a long day at work. Later that afternoon, while taking a break at the corner coffee stand, Ethan couldn't help but notice her again. Lyra sat with a few Xyrexian officials, speaking in their melodic, flowing language. The others around her looked to her for guidance, for leadership, while she remained calm and composed, her eyes occasionally glancing around the room as if something, or someone, had caught her attention. When she looked his way, their eyes met. Ethan felt a shiver run down his spine, but he quickly looked away, not sure what to make of it. He returned to his coffee, but his mind kept wandering back to her. The next day, Ethan was working on routine maintenance when the system malfunctioned. As he worked with the wiring, sparks flew, and the lights flickered. His heart raced as he tried to fix the issue before the entire system went down. Just as he was about to give up, a soft voice called to him from behind. "Need a hand?" Ethan turned around, startled to see Lyra standing there, a concerned expression on her face. The way she moved, delicate yet purposeful, caught him off guard. He had expected her to remain distant, as most high-ranking officials did. But here, she was offering help. I don't know if you should be here." "It's not safe," Ethan said, brushing a bead of sweat from his forehead. Lyra smiled gently. "I'm not afraid of a little danger, Ethan. I'm more interested in how you're handling it." She stepped closer, her gaze never leaving his. Ethan hesitated, but then nodded. "Well, I suppose a second set of hands couldn't hurt, She stepped forward to assist him. He noticed something strange. As her hand brushed past his arm, he felt the heat of her touch. But it wasn't just physical. There was an energy, a current that seemed to pass between them, something he couldn't quite grasp. Lyra didn't seem to notice his discomfort, focusing on the panel in front of them. She worked with precision, her movements graceful but efficient. The way she handled the equipment, her understanding of it, was impressive. It made Ethan's heart beat faster, not just from admiration but from something deeper. "Got it," Lyra exclaimed after a few moments, her eyes lighting up with a sense of accomplishment. "It should be fixed now." Ethan looked at her in surprise. "You're a fast learner. I didn't expect you to know how to handle all this." She smiled faintly, her gaze holding his for just a moment too long. "Let's just say I've been trained to understand more than just diplomacy. There's power in knowledge, Ethan." The way she said his name felt intimate, like it held a hidden meaning that he couldn't understand. For a moment they just stood there in silence as the hum of the spaceport continued around them. Later that night, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. He lay in bed staring up at the ceiling, the image of Lyra's face burning into his mind. There was something in her eyes, something that felt ancient, like a connection that stretched across time and space. But what was it? He thought back. to the moment when she helped him with the malfunction. Her touch had been more than just skin deep. There was something about it that resonated in his chest, like his very soul had been stirred. Was it just attraction? Or was it something more? Ethan couldn't sleep. He kept turning the events of the day over in his mind, trying to make sense of it all. But no matter how hard he tried, the pull he felt toward Lyra couldn't be explained away as simple curiosity or desire. It was deeper, stronger, unnatural. That night, he dreamed of her. In the dream, Lyra was standing before him in a dark, misty forest. Her eyes were glowing, and she reached out to him with an expression of desperate need. As she touched his chest, Ethan felt the warmth flood through him, as if they were linked by some invisible force. Her voice echoed in his mind, whispering words he couldn't understand. When he awoke, the dream felt real, too real. The mark on his chest, one he had never noticed before, throbbed with a faint pulse. Ethan's hand moved instinctively to his skin, feeling the strange symbol embedded there. It was a perfect match. The next day, Ethan couldn't ignore the mark any longer. It wasn't just a dream, it was real. The symbol, the strange connection to Lyra, everything about it felt undeniable. But what did it mean? As he stepped into the spaceport, he found Lyra again, standing near the same docking bay where they had met. This time, she wasn't just a diplomat. She was something more, something he couldn't yet comprehend. And when their eyes met again, he saw the recognition in her gaze. Lyra froze, her breath catching in her throat as her gaze dropped to the mark on his chest. Her eyes widened, and before he could speak, she dropped to her knees. That mark, "You're my mate." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. He was left speechless, the world around him suddenly spinning out of control. Ethan stared down at Lyra, who was still kneeling before him, her face pale with shock. Her eyes locked on the mark on his chest, a strange look in her gaze, somewhere between disbelief and awe. The bustling spaceport around them seemed to fade into the background, as though the world had narrowed down to just the two of them. "Lyra, what do you mean?" Ethan asked, his voice barely a whisper. His heart raced, his mind struggling to make sense of what had just happened. How could she know about the mark? He had never seen it before that night in his dream. Lyra slowly stood, her expression still stunned. She took a step back, her eyes flicking between the mark on his chest and his face. "It can't be. You're human. This shouldn't be possible." Ethan's confusion deepened. "What shouldn't be possible? What are you talking about?" For a moment, Lyra said nothing. She simply stared at him, her breathing slow, as if she were calculating something in her mind. Then finally she spoke, her voice steady but filled with awe. "The mark," she said softly. "The one on your chest. It's the symbol of matehood for my people, the Zyrexians. Only those destined to be bonded share this mark." She paused, taking a deep breath. "It means you and I are connected, Ethan. We are mates." Ethan took a step back, his mind spinning. Mates? His first thought was that she was joking, playing some sort of game. But there was no amusement in her eyes, just a deep, serious intensity. "Wait, hold on," Ethan said, his voice rising slightly. "What are you talking about? Mates? I've never even heard of this mark before. I don't know what you mean." Lyra's eyes softened as she took another step forward, her hands trembling slightly. "I understand. This is difficult to comprehend. I didn't think it would happen this way. Not with you." Ethan's pulse quickened. "What do you mean, not with me?" Lyra hesitated for a moment before speaking, her voice low and filled with a quiet sorrow. "My people have always known that the mark of matehood would appear between our species and humans someday, but no one expected it to happen so soon. Humans have never been considered important, not by our standards. You've always been seen as primitive, not capable of understanding what this bond means." Ethan shook his head, unable to make sense of her words. "So, what, you're saying this mark means I'm somehow destined to be with you?" Lyra nodded, her expression solemn. "Yes, The mark appears when two individuals are fated to become mates. It doesn't matter if you are from another world, another species. If the mark is there, it means you are connected. My people, we believe that this bond is sacred. Ethan felt his heart race even faster, a wave of unease flooding over him. The idea that he, a regular human, was suddenly part of some kind of cosmic bond was overwhelming. I don't understand. I've never even met someone like you before, and now, you're telling me that I'm your mate? That's impossible. Lyra's gaze softened, and she stepped closer, her eyes searching his face. I know it's hard to believe, Ethan. I know this isn't what you expected, but there's no denying it. The mark on your chest matches the one on mine. We are bonded by fate. Ethan stood there, his mind racing as he tried to process the information. He wanted to reject it, to tell her she was wrong. But a part of him, something deep inside, could feel the truth in her words. The mark on his chest, which had appeared out of nowhere, felt real. It wasn't a dream, and it wasn't just some coincidence. You're telling me that my whole life is about to change because of this mark? Ethan asked, trying to keep his voice steady, but his words were tinged with disbelief. Lyra nodded, her expression earnest. Yes, but this is not just about you and me, Ethan. It's about something much bigger than both of us. The Zyrexian people, they don't understand the power of this bond. They don't know what it means. But I do. She stepped back slightly, crossing her arms. There's more to this, Ethan. This bond, the connection between us, it's not just a physical one. It's a spiritual bond that ties our destinies together. It's why you're feeling drawn to me, and why I feel the same about you. It's why we can't ignore it. Ethan felt his stomach twist. This was more than he had ever bargained for. He had never believed in fate or destiny, and now suddenly, here he was being told that his life was somehow intertwined with this alien woman, someone from a completely different world. I don't even know you, Lyra, Ethan said, his voice quiet but firm. How can this be real? How can I be your mate when we've only just met? Lyra's eyes softened with a hint of sadness. I understand, Ethan. This is not something that can be understood overnight. It's overwhelming. But the truth is, there's no denying the connection between us. It's not something we can control, it's fate. And now that it's been revealed, we have to accept it. Ethan's heart was pounding in his chest. I don't know what to do with this, Lyra. I didn't ask for any of this. She nodded, her gaze unwavering. Neither of us did. But fate has its own plans. And now, we must follow where it leads. Ethan stood in silence for a moment, trying to calm his racing thoughts. His life, his world, everything was changing in ways he never expected. It was all too much to process, too quickly. He had never been one to deal with the unknown, and this was far beyond anything he could have imagined. I need time to think, Ethan said finally, his voice tight with emotion. This is too much. Lyra seemed to understand. She stepped back, her eyes still locked on him, a faint sadness lingering in her expression. I'll give you the time you need, Ethan. I know this is difficult, but you will need to decide soon. There is more at stake than just the two of us. This bond is important not just for us, but for both our peoples. Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. He wasn't sure what she meant, but he knew one thing for certain. His life was never going to be the same. Ethan couldn't stop thinking about the conversation with Lyra. The words she had spoken echoed in his mind, filling every thought. We are mates, she had said. It felt impossible, like a story he would have heard in a fantasy book. But now, it was his reality. How could he, a simple human technician, be linked to someone from another world? It didn't make sense. But the mark on his chest, the one that matched hers, left him with no choice but to question everything. The next few days were a blur. Ethan went through the motions of his everyday life, fixing ships, dealing with passengers, and maintaining the spaceport. Yet it all felt distant, as if he were watching from the outside. He couldn't shake the feeling that something deep within him had shifted. Lyra was always in the back of his mind, like a magnet drawing him in, making it impossible to concentrate on anything else. It was a quiet morning when he saw her again. Lyra stood near the docking bay, speaking to a group of Xerexian officials, her voice calm and commanding. Ethan watched her from a distance, feeling that same pull, that same irresistible force that seemed to draw him closer every time they crossed paths. He wasn't sure why he had been avoiding her for the last few days. Maybe he was scared. Maybe he just didn't know what to say. But in that moment, as he watched her, he realized something. He couldn't keep running from the truth. There was something between them, and it wasn't going away. He approached her cautiously, unsure of what he was going to say, but knowing he couldn't keep pretending. Lyra turned as she heard his footsteps, her expression unreadable. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The air between them was thick with unspoken words, the tension palpable. "Lyra," Ethan said finally, his voice steady. "I need to understand. I can't keep ignoring what's happening." Lyra nodded, her gaze softening. "I know. And I'm not asking you to ignore it, Ethan. But I know this is difficult. I understand." She stepped toward him, her presence as commanding as always. Yet there was a softness to her eyes now, a vulnerability that he hadn't seen before. For a moment they stood there, the noise of the busy spaceport around them fading into the background. It felt like they were the only two people in the universe. "I don't know what this means," Ethan continued. "I don't know how to accept it. I've spent my whole life just trying to get by, and now this." Lyra's eyes softened even more. "You don't have to understand everything all at once. This bond, it's not something you can explain with words, it's something deeper, something that goes beyond logic." Ethan swallowed hard, his heart beating faster. "But why me? Why now?" Lyra took a deep breath, and for the first time, Ethan noticed how tired she looked. She had always been so composed, but now there was a weariness in her eyes. "It's not just you, Ethan. This bond is meant to be. The Xerexian people have known about the possibility of humans and Xerexians being connected for centuries. We never thought it would happen, but now that it has..." She trailed off, and Ethan's curiosity got the better of him. "What happens now?" Lyra met his gaze, her expression serious. "We have to acknowledge the bond. We can't ignore it, not without consequence." Ethan felt his chest tighten. "What kind of consequence?" "Rejection of the bond is not something that can be taken lightly," Lyra explained. "For my people, the bond between mates is sacred. It's a union that connects not just our bodies, but our souls. If we were to deny it, it would disrupt the balance of our destinies, and there are those who would not take kindly to that." Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. "So, rejecting it could hurt you?" Lyra nodded. "It would hurt both of us, but it's not just about us. The Xerexian people are watching. They have always believed that humans were too primitive to be worthy of such a bond. The bond between us could change everything for both our peoples. It could create alliances, but it could also create enemies." Ethan's mind raced as he processed what she was saying. The weight of the situation was heavier than he had ever imagined. "I don't know if I'm ready for all of this," he admitted quietly. Lyra stepped closer, her hand resting gently on his arm. The simple touch sent a shiver through him, but it wasn't a shiver of fear. It was something else. Something that felt comforting, like she was grounding him, giving him something solid to hold on to. "You don't have to be ready right now," she said softly, "but we have to begin to understand this, together." Ethan looked down at the mark on his chest, the same one that was on Lyra's wrist. He still couldn't fully grasp what it meant, but he knew one thing for certain. He couldn't walk away from this. Whatever it was, whatever it meant, it was his reality now, and he wasn't sure what the future held, but he knew that Lyra was a part of it. "I'm scared," he confessed. I don't know what this means for me. For us. Lyra smiled faintly, a small, reassuring smile. It's okay to be scared, Ethan, I am too, but we don't have to face it alone. We'll figure this out together. Ethan nodded, feeling a strange sense of relief wash over him. He still didn't know where this bond would take him, but for the first time since the mark appeared, he felt a sense of peace. Maybe, just maybe, they could figure this out. As the days passed, Ethan found himself spending more time with Lyra. At first, it was just small conversations, trying to understand the Zyrexian culture and how the bond between their species worked. But the more they talked, the more he found himself drawn to her. It wasn't just the bond. He was beginning to care about her in ways he hadn't expected. They had dinners together, and he would listen to her stories about her world, Zyrexia, a place where advanced technology and ancient traditions coexisted. He learned about the struggles her people faced, about the expectations placed on her as a diplomat, and about the history that had led them to this point. In turn, Ethan shared his own stories, his own struggles as a human who had never felt like he fit in. Lyra listened with such patience and understanding, and it made Ethan realize just how much he needed her in his life, whether he was ready for it or not. One evening, after a particularly long day at the spaceport, Lyra turned to him, her eyes soft with emotion. Ethan, I don't want to rush you. I know this is all overwhelming, but I want you to know that you are not alone in this. I am here, and I will be with you, no matter what. For the first time, Ethan smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. Thank you, Lyra. I'm not sure what the future holds, but I'm starting to believe we can face it together. Lyra smiled back, and for a moment, the world seemed to slow down. It wasn't perfect. There were still so many unknowns, so many questions. But for the first time since the mark had appeared, Ethan felt like he wasn't just a technician in a busy spaceport. He was something more. He was part of something bigger, something far beyond his understanding, and maybe, just maybe, that was enough. Ethan had never imagined his life could change so dramatically in such a short time. His days were filled with thoughts of Lyra, her soft voice, her deep purple eyes, and the strange connection between them that neither of them fully understood. Yet, though the weight of the bond was still heavy on his mind, something in him had started to accept it. Lyra had been patient, gentle in guiding him through the confusion, and in turn he found himself growing closer to her with each passing day. But peace, it seemed, was fleeting. It was early one morning when Ethan first noticed the change. The spaceport was bustling as usual, with travelers coming and going, the sound of ships docking filling the air. Ethan was working on a maintenance schedule, checking over some equipment in the back, when a sudden, sharp beep from his communicator startled him. He picked it up, expecting it to be another routine call, but what he heard sent a chill down his spine. Ethan, we've got a situation. Lyra's been targeted. The voice on the other end was urgent, almost panicked. It was Captain Nolan, a trusted ally of Lyra's from the Zyrexian delegation. She's in danger, we need to move fast. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. What do you mean, targeted? It's the rebels, Ethan. They've learned about the bond. They believe it's a threat to Zyrexia's stability. They're after Lyra, and they're not going to stop until they've neutralized her. Ethan's stomach dropped. The rebels, those who didn't believe in the bond between humans and Zyrexians, had always been a distant concern. But now it was personal. Lyra, the woman he had only just begun to understand, was in immediate danger, and it was his fault. If he hadn't gotten involved, if they hadn't discovered their bond, none of this would be happening. I'll find her, Ethan said, his voice steady despite the panic rising within him. Where is she? Lyra was in her quarters preparing for a meeting with the Zyrexian officials when Ethan burst in. Her eyes widened at the sight of him, but she quickly masked her surprise with a calm demeanor. Ethan, what are you doing? Here. Is everything all right? Ethan's chest tightened as he took a step toward her, his voice urgent. No, it's not. The rebels. They know about the bond. They're coming for you, Lyra. Lyra's face went pale. I knew it. I knew this would happen, but I never thought they would act this quickly. Do you have a plan? Ethan asked, trying to keep his fear in check. The thought of Lyra in danger, of losing her before they even had a chance to understand their bond, was almost too much to bear. I've had a plan in place for months, she replied, her voice calm but with an edge of tension. But it's not enough. The rebels are more organized than we anticipated. They won't stop until they've neutralized the bond. Ethan's mind raced. He couldn't just let her face this alone. He had to protect her. He had to do something. We need to get out of here, he said, his eyes meeting hers. We can't stay in one place, not while they're after you. Lyra nodded slowly, her expression serious. You're right. But we can't leave without a fight. I can't just run. I have a duty to my people, to Xyrexia. I need to make sure the rebels are stopped before they can do any more damage. Ethan didn't know if he was ready for this kind of fight. He was just a technician, an ordinary human who had stumbled into an extraordinary situation. But standing there, looking into Lyra's eyes, he realized something. He couldn't run. Not from her, not from what was happening. He had to stand by her, no matter the cost. Then we fight, Ethan said, determination settling over him. I don't care what happens. I'll help you stop them. Lyra's eyes softened, a faint smile tugging at the corner of her lips. I didn't think I would find someone like you, Ethan. Someone willing to risk everything. Ethan gave a small nod. I may not understand everything about this bond, but I do know one thing. I'm not going to let anyone hurt you. Two of them left her quarters and made their way to the security hub. As they walked through the halls, the weight of what they were about to face pressed down on Ethan's chest. He wasn't trained for combat, didn't know how to fight, but he was learning quickly that in this world, strength wasn't always about physical power. It was about the courage to stand up when everything seemed stacked against you. Back in the command center, Lyra activated the security systems, locking down all exits and preparing for the worst. The spaceport was now a fortress, but even a fortress could fall. The rebels had their own advanced technology, and they weren't going to stop until they had Lyra under their control. Ethan stood beside her, his heart pounding as the monitors flickered to life. Lyra's fingers moved quickly over the control panel, her mind focused on the task at hand. She was a leader, someone who had spent her life preparing for moments like this. But for Ethan, this was new territory. He had never thought he would be in a situation like this. He was just a technician, someone who fixed things, not someone who fought. Ethan, I need you to stay by my side, Lyra said, her voice steady despite the situation. I don't want you to do anything reckless. I need you focused. We're going to need all the help we can get. Ethan nodded, his jaw clenched in determination. He wasn't going to back down now. He had already come too far. He couldn't let the rebels win. He couldn't let them take Lyra, the woman who, despite everything, had become so much more than just a duty or an obligation. She had become someone he cared about, someone he needed to protect. As the minutes passed, tension filled the air. The spaceport was on lockdown, but the rebels weren't going to wait much longer. They would come. And when they did, Ethan knew that there was no turning back. This fight would change everything. The first wave hit suddenly. Explosions rocked the building, shaking the walls and sending sparks flying from the control panels. Ethan instinctively grabbed Lyra, pulling her to the ground as debris fell around them. The sound of gunfire echoed through the corridors, followed by the growls of the Xyrexian rebels as they stormed the building. We have to move, Lyra shouted over the noise, pulling Ethan to his feet. Ethan could barely think, his mind racing, as he followed her through the chaos. He had no weapon, no experience in battle, but his body moved on instinct. He stayed close to Lyra, trusting her to lead them to safety. They made their way to the underground escape route, a series of hidden tunnels that led to a secret exit far from the spaceport. But just as they were about to reach the tunnel entrance, a group of rebels appeared in front of them, blocking the way. Lyra's eyes narrowed, her body tensing. She stepped forward, her voice cold. Stay behind me, Ethan. Ethan didn't. hesitate. He grabbed a nearby piece of debris, a large metal rod, and stood beside her. They weren't going to run anymore. This was the moment they had to face together. The fight had escalated far beyond what Ethan had imagined. The rebels, determined and ruthless, had stormed the spaceport with a fury that caught everyone off guard. Explosions had ripped through the walls, sending the building into chaos. Gunfire echoed in the corridors, and the sound of marching boots reverberated through the steel floors. For Ethan, the world had turned into a blur of noise, tension, and instinct. This wasn't the life he had expected, but here he was, caught in a war between two worlds, fighting for someone he never thought he would care for. Lyra had led him to the underground tunnels, and though they were far from the safety of the surface, Ethan could feel the weight of every decision bearing down on him. The rebels had the advantage of numbers, but Lyra had her strength, her training, and the sheer will to protect herself and the bond between them. They reached the tunnel entrance, but just as they were about to slip into the darkness below, a group of rebels appeared, blocking their path. The leader, a tall Zyrexian with sharp red markings on his skin, raised his blaster toward them. "I thought we'd find you here, Lyra," the rebel leader sneered, his voice thick with contempt. "You and your human mate. Your foolishness is going to bring ruin to both of our worlds." Ethan gripped the metal rod tighter, his heart pounding in his chest. He wasn't sure how much longer he could hold on to the fear that threatened to break him. Lyra, however, stood, tall, her eyes filled with resolve. "I will never let you destroy what we've started," Lyra said, her voice firm. "You're wrong. The bond between humans and Zyrexians will not lead to ruin, it will lead to something greater." The rebel leader's lip curled in disgust. "You're deluded. A human is beneath you, Lyra. This bond is a joke, and I'll make sure it ends here." Ethan stepped forward, his fear momentarily replaced by a surge of protectiveness. "I won't let you hurt her," he said, his voice stronger than he felt. He looked to Lyra, who gave him a small nod. "You don't understand," Lyra said, her voice calm but dangerous. "This bond is not just between us, it's something bigger than you, bigger than both of us. You can't stop it, no matter how hard you try." The rebel leader's eyes flared with anger. "Then you'll die with that belief." He raised his weapon, ready to fire, but before he could, Lyra moved. She was a blur of motion, her body, a graceful weapon as she disarmed him in a flash, sending his blaster skittering across the floor. Ethan stood frozen for a moment, stunned by how quickly she had moved. But there was no time to process the skill in her actions. The rebels, sensing their leader's defeat, rushed toward them. "We need to go," Ethan shouted, pulling Lyra toward the tunnel entrance. She hesitated for a moment, her eyes flicking toward the rebels, but then she made her decision. "Let's finish this." Together they ran into the darkness of the tunnels, the sounds of the rebels' pursuit growing fainter behind them. Ethan's heart raced, and his legs burned as they moved deeper into the underground network. The narrow passageways were dimly lit, their walls lined with cold stone. They ran, weaving through twists and turns until they reached the end of the tunnel where a small shuttle waited for them. It was their only way out. Lyra rushed to the controls, her fingers dancing over the buttons as she activated the shuttle's systems. The sound of footsteps echoed in the tunnels, and Ethan knew the rebels were close behind. They had no time to waste. "Get in," Lyra urged, her voice sharp. Ethan climbed into the shuttle, his hands shaking. He had never been in a life-or-death situation like this before. Every moment felt like it was stretching out into eternity, and he didn't know if they would make it out alive. But as he looked at Lyra, something inside him steadied. This wasn't just a fight for survival anymore. It was a fight for their future. Lyra sat beside him, her face focused as she piloted the shuttle through the narrow opening at the end of the tunnel. The shuttle shot upward into the sky, the ground below them disappearing as they ascended into the atmosphere. But even as they left the spaceport behind, Ethan could feel the weight of the decision they had made settling heavily on his chest. "We're not out of danger yet," Lyra said, her voice low as she adjusted their course. "The rebels won't stop until they've finished what they started." Ethan nodded, looking out the window at the distant stars. The universe suddenly felt so much bigger, so much more dangerous. The bond between him and Lyra wasn't just a personal connection. It was something that had the potential to change everything, and there were people who would stop at nothing to destroy it. "What happens now?" Ethan asked, his voice soft. Lyra's gaze softened as she looked at him. "We fight. Together. The bond between us is just the beginning. We have to show both our people that we're stronger than any division, any rebellion." Ethan turned to her, feeling the pull of their bond more intensely than ever before. He wasn't just fighting for his own survival anymore. He was fighting for Lyra, for their future, for the possibility of something new and powerful between humans and Zyrexians. "I don't know how we're going to win this," Ethan said, his voice raw with uncertainty. "But I'll fight for you, for us." Lyra reached out and placed a hand on his. The simple gesture spoke volumes: trust, hope, and determination. "That's all we need, Ethan. We'll face it together." For the first time, Ethan felt a sense of certainty settle within him. The road ahead would be dangerous. There would be challenges, enemies, and obstacles they hadn't even begun to imagine. But no matter what came next, he knew one thing for sure: they wouldn't face it alone. The shuttle sped forward, leaving the danger of the rebels behind for the moment. But the real fight was just beginning.